we've got James here today from HumanGayMale, who we got in touch with, and they recently had an event in Brighton that was cancelled by the pub last minute. And also, at the start of the year, actually, you had the big conference in London, isn't it, with like over 100 men, which is initially kind of how I found out about it, because there was like a massive report, and I was like, oh, that looks good. I like a report, me. So we're just going to have a little bit of a conversation about sort of like what started HumanGayMale and kind of like how it's gone and a little bit of the background, because there'll be some things that I definitely know I don't know. You know, I think like everyone in Max is heterosexual pretty much, so like it's kind of like a side of things that I don't have any personal experience in, and like I think all of us haven't really got that. There's lots of things that might be similar, a lot of things that will be very different, a lot of things there might be a little bit of overlap. So we'll do that maybe for like 45, 50 minutes. We might get a little bit carried away, but you'll tell me when to shut up. And then we will have some time for Q&A as well. So again, like if you think of something that you think, oh, that's interesting, I'd like to know a bit more of that, make a mental note, and then we can kind of like pick up on that later. But yeah, thank you very much for coming. It's really good to have you here. But yeah, I think, I can't quite remember, like I think I picked up only like a couple of years ago before you set up HumanGayMale, because I think it's fairly recent. Do you just want to tell us a little bit about how that came about? Because you've been active before, didn't you?
Yeah, so HumanGayMale is the events. So HumanGayMale is an organisation for gay men who reject gender identity ideology. We launched the first event in January 2024, but I've been tweeting as HumanGayMale for a few years before that. I've been involved with LGBT Alliance for a while. I've been to other things, All Sex Matters, and kind of in the gender critical space. And then was looking at what can I do specifically to engage gay men. So in the past I've worked on events for like gay networking events and a speed dating event for gay men, and I've volunteered with places like Stonewall, and I was the chair trustee to the LGBT consortium. So years ago I've done all that kind of stuff, so I was looking at what can I do in the gender critical world that's specifically about engaging gay men. So I decided to have a launch event and see what happened, using the HumanGayMale as a brand. The logo with the 6 men is about two drivers for kind of setting up. So one is about men in general having fewer close friends. So the statistics around a few decades ago, more than half of men had 6 or more close friends, and now it's around 20-something% of men have 6 close friends, 15% of men have no close friends. So that's men in general, not gay men specifically. So in times of crisis, or if you've got issues or concerns, or just want to talk about stuff with people, you don't have those sorts of connections. So the isolation of men generally is kind of one of the drivers. For gay men, typically we'd have more friends than straight men, but if you speak out about the trans issue in kind of gay circles, you could be ostracised completely. That's improving slightly, but given where stuff's been, kind of how captured charities, gay bars, those kind of places are. So yeah, it was about that sense of connection and community for gay men who will be isolated, and also engaging more gay men in the issue, because it's really obvious why it's a women's issue, but it's not just a women's issue. Yeah. It does affect everyone. It affects straight men as well, but it affects gay men in a specific way. So trying to get more gay men to engage with the issue for their own good as well as for the benefit of the women it affects.
Yeah, I guess it affects gay men a lot more directly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I feel it's kind of like a little bit circumvented with myself.
Yeah, I think women there's a definite physical risk issue for women if you're sharing a prison cell or a hospital ward or you're in sports, that's not there for men, straight men or gay men. But in terms of the impact on society, men have the right to single-sex spaces as much as women have the right to single-sex spaces, even if the reasons might be different. So I think, for me, that's part of what I've discovered in running HumanGayMale as an organisation. Nobody cares about how it affects gay men or what gay men talk about this issue for various reasons. Because it's in the media, it's really clear why when there is press coverage, you talk about trans women, because the newsworthiness of that is a more obvious thing to talk about. And it's an obvious physical risk. Trying to talk about why men at all, but gay men specifically have a right to single-sex spaces, and the situations that would be is a more complicated or involved conversation. It's not as headline-worthy, so...
Yeah. And I guess it kind of like plays into slightly different things. Like when we're talking about doing this, we're kind of both like, oh, nobody's going to come protest this.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a bit like, well, part of the idea of protesting philia is also because it's misogyny, isn't it? It's kind of like, oh, well, how dare these women say, like, these men are not women, boo. You know, whereas here it's kind of like, and again, the aspect of safety, I guess, you know, it's probably a lot more risky, even if there's a lot fewer of us, but like kind of going in.
Yeah, it's like we've not had any trouble at any events we've done in terms of people turning up to protest. The Brighton pub that we've gone to is the first time we've had an issue in terms of a venue cancelling the booking. The conference we ran in January in London, so we had 145 booked. There were some transport issues on the day because of weather, so we had about 130 there. We didn't expect anyone to turn out to protest or cause trouble. The two reasons we expected it to be anything at all was for two of our speakers, so Helen Joyce and Alison Keane, who had protests and death threats and stuff before. They were the security concern because of the names people would associate coming to the event rather than the event itself. Because as I've said, turning up as a protester to an event, as an all-women's event, is a different thing than turning up to an all-male event in terms of the response you might get from the people at the event. And the driver for it is largely misogyny in terms of the types of people who turn up to protest that, the conference video.
And violence against women and girls, kind of like they were saying earlier about the video games, isn't it? And we're going to take our games and porn away from us, kind of stuff. And like I said, I kind of like found the report that you'd done at the end of the conference. It was quite comprehensive, really. And I just wondered, like, how did that come about? Like, what was the thought process behind that?
So the conference, I knew I wanted to do something around having a conference, and then halfway through that, our first year, decided we would pick a date. It was our 1 year anniversary, and kind of go for it. Again, thinking if we get anywhere near 100, that would be great, but if we get 50, that's still going to be useful. I wanted it to be, there's lots of ideas I have of stuff we could do as an organisation, but it needs to not just be what I want, it's going to be gay men collectively talking about what the issues are and deciding what actions to take. So the sessions of the conference were kind of different from a lot of other conferences. You know, we had a 15-minute talk from a speaker on a topic, and then a 1 hour conversation in groups related to that topic. So we talked about what the priorities for gay men, ways to campaign, ways to engage, how to deprogram captured gay men, or anyone, but particularly gay men who are captured by the ideology of gender identity, and then kind of practicalities about how we go forward as an organisation and build community. So I put the day together very much in I want this feedback from these conversations. So we have facilitators taking notes for all the tables, and then I wrote all that up, and a few thousand words in, I'm probably about halfway, and I was like, no, there's a lot more to Right, so it is a fairly comprehensive report, but that then informs the stuff we want to do going forward.
And I think like the thing that really struck out to me, and I'm just going to read it out because I can't remember the exact quote, but the thing that really struck out to me in that, there was the thing where you spoke about how like gay men use sex to cope with mental health issues, and I thought, oh, okay. That kind of clicks, and I was just kind of like wondering whether you could sort of like say a bit more about that aspect.
So health in general and mental health is one of the topics that kind of was discussed and identified as a priority. There's a variety of reasons that mental health issues for gay men, or the kind of mental health issues gay men will have because of kind of growing up in the closet and the responses you might get and those sorts of things. There's a few areas around sex and mental health. I think there's a large part of it is around validation. So there's in culture generally the kind of youthfulness, being desirable is kind of a thing. Obviously, in a large part of the gay world, there's that superficial nature to that and expectations. So I think there's a sense of seeking validation for some gay men. So using sex to cope with that as an escape from having to deal with like kind of just casual sex rather than a relationship. So there's a few areas it touches on, but it was the topic that was talked about in a few places around that of using sex for that reason, as opposed to sex being part of a healthy relationship or those sorts of things.
I guess it kind of like piqued my interest because I was like sort of like thinking back when I was a teenager and I was watching porn, and I guess there was definitely something about sort of like maybe about like what you said, like, you know, being attracted is important and all that kind of stuff, and like it's scary and all that kind of thing, and then like porn is kind of like easy in some ways, but it can kind of turn into a thing where it's like it becomes a coping mechanism if you do it a lot.
Yeah.
As well, so I was kind of like wondering what about the sort of like overlap of that.
It was quite interesting listening to the session previously on porn and how straight that conversation is.
Yeah.
Because it's very different. Having talked to people, and part of the interview I did online when I was doing some online videos with people, with a woman who we talked about most gay men won't have seen straight porn or much straight porn and won't realise how violent it is. Like in some ways, gay porn and gay sex could be described as more extreme than straight sex. And there are niches and things that people are into, but generally, like your kind of general baseline of straight porn, it's a much more violent thing than I think a lot of gay men won't realise that's how women are treated in porn. It's also just the difference between how men and women generally, population level, averages, think about and are interested in sex. Like I've jokingly said, but it's fairly true to people in the past several times, gay men don't have more sex because they're gay men have more sex because they're both men. Like it's a different dynamic than a man and a woman in terms of the interest and the what leads to sex and those sorts of things. So the casual sex tends to be an easier, not necessarily easier, but like a more prevalent part of gay dating, for want of a broad term. Because of there's no risk of pregnancy, which is a big part of straight sex, and the implications and associations with a woman who has a lot of sex with multiple partners versus a man, and the societal kind of view of that is different, obviously, for men and women. So
okay, that's really cool. Thank you. And in your report, I also noticed you briefly speaking about chemsex. For those of us who don't know, like me, can you just explain a little bit about?
So, in its simplest, chemsex is sex on drugs. There's a group of specific drugs, so crystal meth and GHB, that are prevalent in the kind of either gay clubbing world or kind of it would be, but it's usually kind of prolonged group sex type situations. It's not always group sex, but it's either using drugs to prolong sex or to disassociate yourself from a sexual situation, or it's just part of it's seen as being like a party scene thing, that there's a bigger expectation on gay men, I think, that drugs is something you're going to do. So yeah, chemsex it's a euphemism for having to get high to have sex. I've always had a problem with using the word chemsex because it's glamorizing it. It's just drugged up sex. And you're free as an adult to do whatever you want, but the problem with that is that there's an expectation that you will do drugs if you're gay, whether it's at clubbing or whether it's in a sexual situation. There's the dangers of being high on stuff that you don't know what you're doing, or you're taking risks that you wouldn't otherwise take, putting yourself into dangerous situations, being in a situation where you're going to get robbed or injured, let alone what could happen with the sex. So it creates a whole kind of set of risks on top of what's usually there. There's also then, I've not seen talked about as much, there's a subset of gay men engaging in sex on drugs where, because of maybe their cultural background, there's a shame to being gay, so the only way they can engage in sex is by partaking in these sorts of group sex activities on drugs, but actually being high is part of the coping with getting into it, because otherwise you couldn't face it because of the shame. So there's a whole package of mess that I think needs dealing with the chemsex issue.
And I know we've got a couple of people from All Gays in Ireland in the audience as well, and you did, I think, like a campaign recently, didn't you?
An awareness campaign, and finding different statistics on what causes it and why people go into it. In Ireland, it particularly affects migrant men, which is very interesting. One of the people we knew, he moved to Ireland from Mexico, and he became severely addicted to heroin from chemsex, and he had to actually leave the country because he just couldn't cope with the underworld. So it's something that happens all around us, but it's so hard to actually see. It's a very scary thing going on.
And is it quite a big big deal, and is it kind of like getting worse?
Yeah, I think it's so we've highlighted it as one of the areas within the subset of health stuff that we're going to do something on. Obviously, Northern Gays Island and the LGBT Alliance have also done a report on it recently. So yeah, we're keen to talk to them about what are the practical things. I think it's definitely an initial thing is an awareness raising of it, but then it's looking at kind of what are the practical things that we can do to support people who are recovering from that situation, because it's an addiction, it's part of addiction set of stuff. The difficulty we have is the addiction services and the health services are also captured by gender identity ideology and sex positivity and all those sorts of things. So the traditional services that you would turn to if you were in that situation for help aren't really in a position too much to help you because of the way they're thinking.
Yeah. Well, when you say sex positivity, what do you mean there? Like?
So the kind of permissiveness, it kind of relates to some of the porn stuff as well. So it's the sex work.
Kink affirmative.
Yeah, that part of it. Sex work is work. All that kind of stuff kind of fits under a broad umbrella of sex positivity. So it should be So I knew or still know a guy who, in the days before PrEP, which is a drug you can take to prevent getting HIV, there's a lot of chill-outs, we refer to as kind of group sex, London, but elsewhere, where drugs would be a major factor, and he ran kind of group sex parties that were with condoms and with no drugs, which is like really unusual for that kind of scene, and he had that described to him by someone else that's very sex positive. It's like, so there could be there are things that you could be that are positive, but actually, in its broadest sense, it's permitting things that otherwise might be risky. That's not to say they always are, but it's a label that's used to ignore risk, I think.
Yeah, okay. And do you think it's also, because you sort of spoke about that assumption that you're going to do drugs, so does it then also mean like when there's men who do engage in chemsex, it's like harder to get help because it's kind of like, might it stop them because it's kind of like a bit more part of the expectation? That maybe you engage in that kind of thing? So
I've not. I'm very boring vanilla gay in very many ways. But I think that this is part of the conversation I want to now pick up with organisations like Not All Gays and LGBT Alliance in terms of we've got stats on kind of what's happening and how it's happening and the causes to then look at what are the routes out, what are the help people make. Like, people can be functioning alcoholics and functioning addicts, and as adults you have freedom to do whatever you want. I'm not looking to shame people for their choices, but I do want there to be support for people who feel either compelled or coerced or whatever it is into harmful activity.
Yes. Okay, thank you. From that report then, we've sort of spoken about a couple of things. What other priorities did you sort of like filter out at the moment for gay men?
So the report lists 10, not in any particular order other than largely what came up most. So the top one is separating LGB from TQ+. They're two separate things, and we've got to kind of separate them entirely, I think. Getting that across to people that trans is nothing to do with gay. I think people understood there are some very effeminate gay men who live as if they're women in order to cope with their gender dysphoria, even if they wouldn't know that to call it that in the past. I think a lot of gay men will be familiar with that. That is far from what the trans movement is now. In that it's mostly straight men, or it's straight women who are pretending to be gay men to get gay men, because they are fetishizing gay men. What the general public might understand it to be is very far from what it actually is. It's just seen as an extension of gay rights, and it's nothing to do with it. And the backlash and the harm is going to hit gay men most, but it's going to hit all of us. So they're making it really clear that those are separate issues, and separating them out is a top priority. The second one is around protecting single-sex spaces for gay men. So very similar to the stuff that's being talked about in terms of women's single-sex spaces, and for different reasons and for some similar reasons. So that's everything from social spaces. There are gay sports teams, like gay hiking clubs and those sorts of things for gay men, that if you want to let in anyone who calls themselves a gay man, it's not really a male space anymore. So that touches on the male isolation and trying to have male support networks and that kind of thing. But also through to things like medical or health support groups, where you've got a gay men's group for HIV is the example I've used in other stuff. There are no HIV support groups specifically for gay men in London anymore. Those that there are would include anyone who identifies as a gay man. So there may not be any women pretending to be gay men at those groups, but that might put off gay men who want to go and talk about their issue with other gay men who are in the same position they are. So yeah, identifying and protecting and maintaining single-sex spaces for gay men is kind of the top. So the top two. I won't list all the others. But they're covering things like younger gay men, ageing, health, those sorts of things. One that's actually at the bottom of the list of the priorities in the report, but that's going to be a whole separate section in the report, is the deprogramming. So that's probably like the third in terms of the top ones. We talked about how do we get a deprogramming kit. We probably won't have a specific actual kit, but what are the questions that you can ask people, particularly gay men, about the trans and gender issue that kind of plants the seed to get them to realise that it's all bullshit. There's a lot of going along with it because it's seen as a thing to do, and if you haven't really looked into it as a gay man, you're just going along with what Stonewall's been saying or what the local, what used to be called a gay bar, has been saying, and you're just like, well, everyone's part of LGBTQ and everyone should have rights, and isn't that nice? So it's kind of trying to get through to those gay men. These are very different issues, and there's harm to you, there's harm to a future generation of gay men who are the little feminine boys now who are being put on a pathway to puberty blockers and those sorts of things. So yeah, how we cut through the bullshit to reach gay men is a priority.
Yeah, and I think that sounds like quite a hard job.
Yeah.
You know, like because the whole thing is kind of like the rabbits are the hat, how do you stuff it back in, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I think, you know, like Robin and Joe sort of spoke about education, but I guess when you're talking about, you know, like in terms of like the pornography, the similar thing applies to like LGBTQIA+. You know, that's in schools, but also, you know, like a lot of, well, medical professionals, psychologists, psychiatrists are all like, you know, affirming. You know, it's kind of like there's, in a way, like the amount of land they've grabbed is a lot wider.
Yeah. Yes, so we've got 2 decades of cleaning up to do. Like the Supreme Court ruling on definitions of Sex and the Equality Act earlier this year is a really important thing that kind of clarifies the law and enables things to move from there. And there's been other kind of legal cases. Those are really important and needed. But actually unpicking all of this from policies in schools and workplaces and in professional bodies that are supposed to be helping and the individual activists who, regardless of the law, are still going to be pushing their thing. It's going to take us 2 decades to unpick all of that. We've then got detransitioners to support. So for us, obviously, our focus will be gay men who have been told, because you're effeminate and you like girls' things, you're really a girl, and have gone down a path that may just be social transition, it may be puberty blockers, it may be as far as surgery, but there's support they're going to need. So yeah, there's a lot of, it's such a broad issue on the gender identity, it's in lots of different areas, that the unpicking all of that and repairing the damage is going to take a while.
Yeah, and I guess it is such a hard thing as well, because like a lot of this stuff, it's been kind of like put in there already, so like there's a really strong, firm sort of like foundation that you don't kind of like have to chisel away at.
Yeah, and it's, because it's so broad, if you start talking to most people about it, it sounds crazy. If you go into, this is why I want to look at what are the questions for a deprogramming kit that can kind of cut through that, because it varies for different people. So using the example of women's sports, for certain people that's a really clear thing that you can explain. A male-bodied person in a women's game of rugby is a risk. But there's other people where they're not really going to get that or care about that, so you've got to go down another route about why that matters. I think there's an assumption for some people, and I've definitely heard it said or articulated, not this directly, but there's an assumption that, well, gay men should just get this and be supporting women, especially lesbians, because of how it affects them. It affects women and lesbians. It's like, how many people do you know that give a shit about anything if it doesn't affect them directly? or at least they can see how it could affect them directly. There is an amount of altruism, and that's true, but also just relying on that, if we could rely on that, we would have fixed this 5 or 6 years ago. So we've got to talk about the issues, not just because of how it kind of fits into the having better men, boys grow up to be better men benefits women, which it does, but it also benefits the men as well. It benefits everyone. We can't just sell that to men as you're doing this to be better men for the sake of women. It has to be that, plus you're doing it to be better men yourselves and make society better. Like it's a complex.
Yeah, like a self-development thing almost.
Yeah.
And I agree with that, I think, because it's a lot more like an intrinsic kind of like motivation doing this kind of. And I guess the thing that it sort of like makes me think about as well is sort of like engaging gay men is, when, and I'm sure you'll have similar things, similar struggles, but I guess when talking to, let's say, heterosexual men about sort of like certain topics, there'll be a bit of a drop-off. Some of them will be interested in men's violence against women and girls, but they don't really want to talk about porn, because it's too uncomfortable. Others don't want to talk about it because it's sex work is work, and then like some of them don't want to touch the sex gender stuff because and I guess I was sort of like interested in like you had a really good response to that first sort of like conference because 100 plus men is really good.
Yeah.
And I guess I was sort of like wondering, do you think there's an impact in terms of that? Because I often say like if we as sort of like men don't, if the culture doesn't change in terms of men's violence against women and girls, like my life doesn't change. Like I've got nothing directly to lose, and a lot of the time when men do get involved, it might be because they have a sister or a mum or a relative, or they've grown up in a domestic violence situation. And they've experienced it, so they know it firsthand, and that kind of brings them to kind of like do something. And I wondered whether there's like a sense that you have that like gay men are really feeling the impact that this is having, and that's kind of like what's helping your events kind of.
Yeah, it's easier in the same way that so women's events down the road, but also other things that have been going on are much bigger. There's many more women that go to those, because there are many more women than there are gay men. So it's slightly easier, but also it's a more obvious direct impact on them, and that's why they're involved. For men in general, but for gay men, it's about seeing either the personal direct impact, or like say the example of where you can see it in someone or you can relate to it in some way. So it is easier to engage gay men in it, I would suspect, than straight men, because we can talk about were you an effeminate little boy, and if you were around that age today, would you be being told, are you really a little girl? As a gay man now, do you want to be in a space that, whether it's a sex club or a sauna or just a social event with a woman pretending to be a gay man? Do you want to be excluded from your social spaces if you say, hang on, I'm not interested in female-bodied people, or however you might describe it, and then all your friends shun you? So there are direct impacts of that ideology on gay men that it's easier to get them to realise. And a lot of the men who come to the events or who kind of join talk about, well, particularly coming to the events, sometimes it's like a therapy session because it's the first time they've been able to talk about the issue. They've read about it or seen stuff or experienced stuff, but they're not allowed to talk about it anywhere, or they haven't found anywhere they can talk about it, either because their work is very captured or their social circles are captured. So just to be able to talk about how crazy the whole situation is, as well as the impact on them or on gay men in general, or the impact on women as well, to be able to talk about it, there's not a space for themselves to do that. So it's providing that kind of space is a really valuable tool.
Yeah. And what do you think might be a way of sort of, I can't think of a good way to phrase it, but like you said, there's a lot of like awareness of sort of like how it affects women.
Yeah.
Like how do you think we can maybe like show more of the impacts that it has for gay men as well, like in terms of the impact of like gender ideologies? Because I do sometimes find like there's not a lot of that, and there should be probably a little bit more, because like a lot of things like you said kind of get smashed up with the LGBTQI plus, and you got like Drag Race and all that kind of stuff, and there's all these kind of other
Yeah.
things going on as well. So like, how can we like maybe isolate some of the things out to kind of like get people more aware of it?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult as well because the general public perception of society's understanding of or interaction with gay men as a population is quite limited to stereotypes or what's in TV. So RuPaul's Drag Race is one of the worst things I think could have happened for gay men because it's kind of like a straight women's almost fetishization of gay men. So one of the sorry, I'm going off a slight tangent. One of the drag queens on there, Trixie Mattel, he's a really talented singer actually and very funny. He's one of the few who've actually got a career outside of and because of Drag Race. But in his live show as Trixie Mattel mentions something and then kind of there's like a little sidebar for all the straight girls in the audience, that's a part of gay culture you're not aware of because it hasn't been a mini challenge on RuPaul's Drag Race. Because their whole understanding of gay culture is what they see on Drag Race, and it's such a limited representation of drag, let alone gay culture. So it's positive to that, but it kind of sums up the most of society only sees part of and a stereotypical, often sanitised for TV part of gay culture.
I guess sort of like maybe changing a little bit that perception, like how can we sort of, because it'll be kind of like part of that, won't it? Like, so changing the perception of, gay men in general, but also then how might that, I guess, help you sort of, cut off the TQ kind of bits without...
Yeah, I think it does go hand in hand because I think people see LGBTQ, even if they don't know what the letters mean or what the two different aspects of that are, and they just see it all as it's all gay 2.0, and we'll support that from a distance as a nice thing. So yeah, it does go hand in hand in terms of separating that out in people's minds, and also getting through to gay men why gender identity stuff is harmful to them. Like, we've been going since January last year, and it's only been in the last couple of months of this year that we've managed to get any kind of media coverage. And it's not something I've been going out and doing loads on, because it feels like a full-time job, but this isn't my job. I run this alongside what I'm supposed to be doing as a job.
This is your hobby.
This is a hobby for the moment. I mean, we're relatively small and relatively new, but it's only been recently been able to kind of get any media attention, because no one cares. Like, there's a lot of people who want to blame gay men for the gender stuff because it's come out of an LGBTQ plus sector. There's a lot of the LGBTQ staff networks that are run by gay men who are in a position where they're not really affected by it. Well, they're the Michael Cashmans, those who know that dickhead, in the House of Lords. Those sorts of gay men who are insulated from the actual harms, who are espousing the be kind, we're all part of one team, trans women stuff. So there are individual gay men who are very responsible for the damage, in the same way that there are, Ruth Hunt, Nancy Kelly, Holly Carmichael, Hannah Webley, individual women who are the turkey stone for Christmas as well. So yeah, I can see where there is blame to point at individual gay men. The problem is that it's too easily this has come out of the kind of permissiveness of what gay culture is like, and that they added the TQ and now they're to blame. So talking about why it affects gay men and talking about gay men standing up against it doesn't fit a narrative of we're going to blame the gay men. It's a minority of people who are taking that approach, but it makes it difficult to kind of talk about or get any kind of traction on. There are gay men who are standing up against this. We've had a lot more people sign up to our mailing list since seeing the Telegraph article and Time stuff earlier this year, or earlier this summer, and talking about the case with the pub here. But on the how did you hear about us bit on the sign-up form, like every third one is a never heard of you, never knew you existed, so glad to have found you, like I didn't know gay men were talking about this, those sorts of messages. So that's partly on us being relatively small or relatively new in getting that message out there. But there's a lot of gay men who I definitely don't know that we exist, but a lot of gay men who don't yet realise this issue is an issue. It was really obvious why it affects women and lesbians particularly, and they've been on this generally for a lot longer. But there's still, most of the general public don't really have any idea. They'll have maybe heard of the Supreme Court case, or they'll have heard of a name being mentioned somewhere in the news and stuff, but most people don't realise the gender identity issue is an issue, and gay men are a big part of that. So it's getting that through to them in a way that's not blaming them, and also not... Anything they have seen will have been where they're being told people like me are hateful bigots and a transphobe. So it's trying to get stuff across to them without having to caveat everything as, well, we're not transphobic, because I couldn't give a shit if you think I'm transphobic. I'm going to talk to you about reality.
And I guess also, like you said, it's been kind of like a couple of decades in the making, so the younger generations, they will have kind of grown up with all of that, and they will have like a whole bulk of...
It's not really a priority, but it's indicative of something that we do need to prioritise. And actually, we are going to do a piece around gay history. But I spend the whole of June, did it last year on the 1st of June, and then realised by the 3rd of June, I'm now going to have to do this every day. And I did it again this year on LinkedIn, keyword searching for Stonewall, Marsha, Brick, or those sort of things. And any post that talked about how we owe all our gay rights to a black drag queen, not drag queen, a black trans woman at the Stonewall riots, I correct them with the links to the interview on camera with him saying, no, I know I'm a boy, I wasn't even there. There's this myth that a black trans woman threw the first brick and that started the Stonewall riots. The riots that took place 2 years after homosexuality was decriminalised in England. But there's this perception, particularly with younger generation of everyone, not just gay people, that we owe everything to these trans women of colour who started these riots. And it's like, they weren't the start of things, those individuals weren't there. It's just, how do you unpick such an embedded myth?
Yeah.
So, and that's just one example of a complete lack of it's complete ignorance of gay history. So again, one of the things we were talking about at the conference in January is around a gay history project in terms of what stuff do we need to record and put out there to kind of correct some of that.
Yeah, okay, that sounds really good. Because I think, that's the other thing, like the language is just continuously changing as well. Like, you'll get, I don't know, if you go to an art gallery, and it used to be sort of like, first gay men, this, and now it's like LGBTQ, and it just kind of all gets chipped away. So like there's a constant fight on that front as well. So the past and the present kind of.
Yeah, referring to the stonewalling as an LGBTQ plus bar. It's like, no, that wasn't even a concept then, let alone what the patrons of that bar. The interesting thing is all the photos, it's mostly white gay men, and yet apparently it was all black trans women. It's like there are photos. So we've been doing events in London every month since January last year, and then during last year we started doing some other cities around the UK and in the US. From the beginning of this year we've had regular events in Scotland and Birmingham, kind of getting there with Manchester, and we've done a few other one-offs. So we're going to do our first Brighton event in August this year. So booked the private dining room at the Lion and Lobster, which is kind of over on the west side of the city, away on the same day as Pride, as an alternative to Pride. So we did it in London last year. This year for Birmingham, Manchester, Glasgow, Glastonbury and London, we were doing something on this, and Brighton, doing something on the same day as Pride. So it wasn't an alternative Pride, it was an alternative to Pride. So for gay men who don't want anything to do with the nonsense that Pride and LGBTQ plus has become, to come and have a drink and just do the event. So we booked this space at this bar, at the pub. We don't release the details of where our venue's going to be until usually the day before, maybe a couple of days before. We've never had an issue, it's not that we weren't expecting it. Like I said, if it was going to happen anywhere, it would be Brighton, it would be. But it turned out somebody had infiltrated our mailing list, and when we sent out the venue details on the Friday night, or Friday afternoon, they forwarded it to the pub and kind of complained that they were hosting this event with all these transphobic bigots. So the pub emailed me on the Saturday morning to say, we're cancelling the event because the nature of your group has come to our attention. So I phoned them, I still came down, I spoke to the manager, explained the Supreme Court ruling, explained Alison Bailey's recent case where her vet had said she needed to find a new vet for her dog because whatever bullshit reason they gave, and it transpired it was because they knew who she was and she's a prominent gender critical campaigner, and the vet's lost. And the manager was like, no, the booking is cancelled. And I said, can we just have a drink at the bar? And it's like, no, we're not going to serve you. So I'm like, I don't want to, but this does mean we'll go to court. So yeah, we found another bar in a hotel on the seafront and went for a drink there. But we are now taking the pub and the brewery to court. Well, we've done the letter before claim, setting out this is what's happened, this is how you've broken the law, this is what we'd like to do about it, and if we can settle, we won't take you to court. But we're not asking for money, we're asking for £1 each for the 9 of us who are named co-claimants, so the nominal amount. If we go to court and the judge decides we should more, we'll take more, but we're not doing it for money, we are doing it to establish that you cannot cancel a booking because people believe there are two sexes. So we are, under the Equality Act, protected characteristic of religion or belief. The belief in, or the lack of belief in gender identity ideology is a protected belief. So we're taking them to court, pursuing action on that front, but also they've discriminated us on the basis of same-sex, of sexual orientation, which is also a protected characteristic. So as defined by the Equality Act and clarified by the Supreme Court. So sex in the Equality Act means biology. So same-sex in the Equality Act means a gay man is a male attracted to another male. And they've told us that's not acceptable. Essentially, by cancelling the booking because of who we are and what our views are, cancel the booking, they have discriminated on our sexual orientation as defined by the Act, as well as our gender critical beliefs. So we've had a response from their lawyers, and we will be negotiating what settlement looks like. I doubt they're going to want to settle because we want them to admit they've broken the law, and they're not going to do that. So
yeah, I mean, it kind of sounds silly not to settle. It does. In my book, because it's just you're just
and they may do, like if they passed it off to insurance and to a law firm, that might be what they choose to do. At the moment, they're asking for all the promotional material, which is like all the emails we sent and the tweets. So we sent that. But yeah, if it goes to court, we're not. Although the court can award financial damages, what we want is a judge to say this was a breach of the Equality Act, so that other groups, if they are in a similar situation, can cite. A judge has already said this is illegal, so it gives that tool to others as well as if it happens to us again. If we don't go to court, the next best thing is that they admit that they broke the law and how they broke the law.
Yeah. And you had a crowdfunder for the campaign, didn't you?
Yeah, so we've set up on Crowd Justice, which we paused, it's still live, but we paused asking for money because we've hit 10,000, we've spent about half of that so far. And if they settle, we won't need more than that. If we do end up going to court, we're probably going to need about 50,000-ish. But we raised 10 grand in 4 days. So
yeah, I was going to say,
I'm fairly confident we'll do it.
The response was pretty amazing in terms of the money that you could sort of like going up.
Yeah.
Have you sort of like had any negative reactions to it?
Not particularly. We've had there's an Instagram account and Substack called Turf Watch Brighton. They're probably along the road right now. Who are the ones that infiltrated the mailing list? So I'd never heard of them, but they posted on the morning of the event to say we've infiltrated the list. We found out what the venue is and complained to the venue. Here's what the venue said. We got the event cancelled. Which I posted a comment to say, we just moved to a different bar, you've done nothing but cause a legal problem for the pub, so well done. And given me an article in the Telegraph, well done. Yeah, they posted a few things, but again, we're going to do a social this evening while I'm in Brighton with HumanGayMale. The infiltrator, I've worked out who that was, whether there's another one, but I don't expect they're going to turn up and cause a problem because they've got bigger fish to have a go at along the road. But also I mean, I might be being too flippant, and I don't expect to be in any kind of physical risk myself because of it or at events, but I'm slightly hardened and I'm self-employed, so I can't get fired. There are other guys who come to our events who are not in that position. At our conference, we had different coloured lanyards for people who didn't want to be in photographs, and a lot of the younger guys couldn't be in photographs because they were worried, what if there's a photo of me and work finds out? And it's scary to think that we're still in a situation that people are worried about not being able to talk about reality in case work finds out. So I wasn't planning to move to a bigger venue. The venue I was hoping to book is owned by an Anglican church. That transpires don't like gay people, so they've refused. So yeah, they've refused the booking. I reacted much the same way, but because we hadn't signed anything, there's no legal action. Technically it is discrimination, but the resolution would be to provide the venue, and that's not going to be resolved by January. So we may write a letter so that we can lodge that formally as we think you discriminated against us, and you should really be clearer in your advertising of your venue if you're not going to. There are exemptions around some stuff for faith groups, or it's not the actual church. So. Yeah, so we're in a venue that's the same size as last year, so at the moment we'll have 150 people. We're about 15 tickets away from selling out. I've not announced any of the speakers yet, so I'm quite pleased in a way, having run conferences in my day job before where it's all about if you don't tell people who's there, they're not going to come. We've nearly sold out because people want this kind of event, and the success of last time, particularly with the format where it is very interactive and you are part of what we're creating. So yeah, we've got that at the end of January. We're talking in terms of roughly, we've got stuff around younger gay men and their issues, older gay men, or the issues you face as you age as a gay man, detransitioners, some more workshop practical things around kind of campaigning and gay history and political engagement and stuff. So it's a full-on day.
Yeah, it's broad.
I have a comment to make, and then I want to know if it makes sense to you, if you have observed that already. And I think it has to do also with the previous talk, because just like Rob, I don't know if he's still here, I'm of a generation that didn't have porn online like that, so I know that girls now, younger girls do. But what I did still have when I was younger was the fan fiction world. And for those who have been in this world, it's women writing porn for other women, but it's always two men. The characters are always two men in a romantic relationship and having sex. Usually from a movie, a TV show, or a book where the men are straight, but then in those stories, the women write them as gay. I'm not completely sure about why, maybe because relationships seem more equal, on an equal footing between two men. I don't know. But when I started hearing about girls who now say they are gay men, and you talked about fetishizing gay men, this came to my mind because in the same way that we see porn influencing men who are saying they are women in a certain way, and warping sexual preferences. I have seen with female friends who had never thought about this. They have read so much fan fiction that now they only want to go to that fantasy about two men. So I don't know if you that seem to observe also women who say they're gay men, if you see that influence.
Yes, definitely. I think so. We touched on it in the report because it's part of the conversations that came up at the conference, and I've talked about it with others. I think there's the fetishization of gay men is a thing outside of the trans issue that there are a group of women who are. It's beyond I've got a gay best friend and I want to go to the gay bar kind of female friend. There is an obsession with gay men by a subset of women generally, but I think the group that you're talking about in terms of the younger women who identify as men, but they're straight women, so they are now identifying as gay men. I think the fan fiction is definitely has played a part in that, whether it's just literature or whether it's the actual porn end of that. It's not in the same way they were talking earlier about you're not just observing porn, you are part of it. They've put themselves in that world, and now they think, well, if I call myself a man, I'm going to be able to go and get with other men. And that invasion into gay male spaces, whether it's, let's say, saunas and sex clubs and those sorts of spaces, or whether it's just social spaces in their hope that they are going to be accepted as. And they've been sold a lie because they're not going to be accepted as. And actually there are certain situations they're putting themselves at risk as well. But yeah, it's definitely a factor in that.
So I work for a local authority as a town planner, so I'm aware of the protected characteristics. And I've noticed in the past year or so, we get a lot of communications from the chief exec around pushing the trans ideology, and it to kind of such an extent that it seems like protected characteristics of sex and sexuality is just been completely kind of buried. And do you have any advice on how to kind of broach this topic in the workplace?
Yeah. So one of the conversations we had at the conference was around the role that gay men can play in influencing and campaigning and the stuff we used to do in the workplace particularly. An example I think is in the report, and I mentioned in I think in the Telegraph interview as well, a couple of gay men going to HR and asking about why this policy uses the word queer throughout. You know how problematic queer is as someone who heard it before getting punched in the face years ago, kind of.
Yes.
That approach to HR is going to have a much more impact to make change than a couple of women going to HR and saying, why are the toilets all gender neutral? So gay men have a role and a responsibility to make use of that power and influence to challenge stuff. So there's also it makes it much harder for HR or EDI or whoever's pushing policies to write off people questioning it if a gay man challenges it, because we're seen as being part of the LGBTQ, so at the very least it throws them. So yeah, if you find a few gay men who can raise the question with the chief exec or whoever else about it, we touch on it in the report bit in which section it is, but we have got something around the kinds of approaches to take. So it's not just going in and complaining, it is about how are you raising questions in a good faith, inquisitive way that gets people to realise this isn't okay just to go along with. But yeah, the short version of that is find a few gay men who are prepared to go and complain.
There's actually a book by some of the American and English writer who wrote a book about trans ideology and then followed it up with a book on how to challenge...
Helen Pluckrose. Helen Pluckrose?
Helen Pluckrose.
Yeah, so there are cynical theories, which is talking about trans and gender, basically all the kind of academic areas that then became activism and the woke stuff.
And what was the book after this?
I can't remember the name of the follow-up, but it's basically a toolkit in the workplace of how to challenge some of these things. So if you look up Helen Pluckrose...
Yeah, I mean, I think that many of us have been on a journey about how to, challenge these things in workplaces and find out. I mean, you're right about discrimination around sexuality, discrimination around sex, discrimination around belief as well. Actually, are the three ones that I've always kind of stressed in my communications with work. And again, as you say, trying to do it in a kind of good faith way that, somebody somewhere wants to try and hold these things in harmony along with gender reassignment. It's tough, it's a learning curve. I just want to say that your deprogramming kit, there's one really, really obvious question, I suppose, in there, which I guess you know what that is, but, super obvious question, which doesn't take you all the way there, but how do you find the words to ask, do you want to have sex?
That's part of what so it's actually one of the sessions for this coming conference is to actually go into more detail on, it's like I've got a thing I keep mentioning around, I want 2 or 3 questions I can print on beer mats, and then go around to gay bars and just put them out without anyone giving me permission to do so. So gay men just read a question and then think. So yeah, it's do you want to fuck somebody with a vagina? Yeah. Essentially, but it's how you ask that in a way that's not going to be, that's just a transphobic question, because if they switch off a question because of what they've been told they're supposed to believe. So once you're getting into the conversation, and I've had other people tell me about this, there's a lesbian friend a group of older gay men who are her circle of friends, if they are just sat at home drinking and talking, don't believe in any of this ideology, but they could never have that conversation. They say they can't have that conversation when they're out. So actually, once you get into the conversations, people do know reality. Gay men know what reality is, and there's a thing. Woke in the streets, turf in the sheets. The gay men who are reporting that trans men are men aren't fucking any of them. I guarantee you. But it's how we ask the question that not just gets through, but doesn't stop them from even wanting to engage in the question because of how we ask it. So that's the next piece of work, is that how we, not just what the questions are, but how we ask them.
Same-sex attraction, or saying same-sex, or saying homosexual is a transphobic dog whistle. So that's a really good way that I've been able to be like, hang on a minute, that's what I am. And that's in the NHS.
Right.
The NHS does not use the word homosexual anywhere, and it says it's an outdated medical term. So I think it's really important to bring that word back as a sense of pride, for God's sake. And I wondered if it was going to be featured, that word specifically, in all your claims, based off of the Equality Act.
So that point is made in the conversations in the report, because of what came up in conversations, is the importance of that, and the wider point around the challenging on language, or pointing out on language, that's going to be presented as the challenge. I've written a piece prior to doing the events that I keep posting now, every Pride Month and LGBT History Month, that I wrote on LinkedIn, for workplaces, and it's the various bits and pieces about the separating it out, but it's if you're talking about, particularly if you're a campaigning organisation, for example, and you're talking about an issue that affects lesbians, don't talk about it as an LGBTQ plus health thing, talk about it as a lesbian thing. If you're talking about a trans thing, talk about, and they tend to talk about trans on its own. So it's reminding them that actually if you're talking about a gay male health thing, or whatever the issue might be, that you're referring to the groups, that you don't have to always, even if you still have an LGBTQ plus stuff network and an LGBTQ plus strategy, break it down in between. So I also, when I have time, will go and seek out and challenge people on LinkedIn posting stuff around research that's LGBTQ plus research on health or ageing or housing. I mean, like, do you disaggregate that data? Because I can guarantee you the issues for lesbians when they age are going to be very different from the issues for gay men when they age, which is a completely separate set of issues for people who've mutilated their bodies because of their gender identity as they age. So if your research is only looking at stats for LGBTQ+, it's meaningless. So that's a way you can also talk to your employers. If you're doing stuff and you're lumping it all together, your work is meaningless in terms of actually having an impact. So again, that's another way of trying to get that through to your employer, is we can have this, you know, fluffy umbrella stuff, but actually how we do stuff, we need to be able to talk about the individual steps within that as well.
I had a question about deprogramming entire associations. So there's a lot of gay associations who are just LGBTQ+ by default, and they're like really great associations, like sports associations, or it could be anything, but they have a culture where if you speak out against it, it's kind of like coming out of the closet a second time as a TERF, and it really doesn't go over well. So would your advice be to take people one-on-one, like one-on-one conversations, and deprogram like that? Or is there a way to do it at an association level as well?
So it's kind of both, and it's going to take multiple things. So there's a guy who's one of our members who I know who's in the north of England, who was a member of what was a gay rugby club. That's now an LGBTQ rugby club, although it's all gay men still that play, and who's been suspended and is out going through an appeals process about being his membership. And we talked about what's the most effective, like what do you want as the outcome, and like what's the legal thing. So I think there are going to be instances like that where, because of the sporting bodies that club is associated to, like UK Rugby or whoever it might be, I think there are going to be policies and rules that they need to abide by. So there's a corporate level, association level route to take in terms of the, not necessarily legalities, but that kind of, you know, rules and regulations that you've signed up to that you can challenge side of things. And then with individuals, it is also a lot of small associations are popularity contests as to who gets onto the committee and stuff like that. So there's a challenge that with individuals. There is, if people were so inclined to be Machiavellian enough, an argument that, you know, what if 50 of us joined the outdoor gay club and then we all voted at the AGM and we took over? And then changed the policy. there's a lot of work and I don't want to have to do that, but there's even that, like eventually it's a case of you need to stand. So we were talking earlier about there's a therapist who's one of our members who has recently stood for his professional bodies, one of the elected posts for his board, for his professional body, and he's talked a lot about the gender issue in doing so, and he's been elected. So while the body's official position is not going to be anything other than gender identity ideology, he's at least got a foot in the door, and there must be enough support from membership that he's been voted on. So it's individual groups and actions to those sorts of things as well. I think if you can take a technical or legal or rules and regulations challenge, do that if it's really clear. But otherwise, it's the individual relationships. And once you've got enough people who, individually, it's kind of like the Posey Parker thing with the Be the Billboard and why we're going to be doing more merch. If you're wearing a pin or you've got the mug and enough people know, I believe in reality too, it's a safe space to talk to other people about reality as well, that you're not on your own. That's the biggest tool in the other side thing is the isolation of people. So if you feel you can't talk about it, but actually everyone else at work agrees with you, but you're all afraid to talk about it, they win. So yeah, it's both.
Right, yeah, I see, in terms of reaching out to people, getting more gay people aware of things, what I found is when they reach out to not all gays, they're not turfy whatsoever, like they wouldn't have much of an issue with trans, but they are just sick of all the woke shit. They're like just so anti-woke, like, oh, finally a gay guy who's not like talking all this retarded bollocks basically about all this fucking shit, like they're just sick of it. And so when you're reaching people, I think it's better to come from that kind of angle, not necessarily right wing, but just breaking all the woke like rhetoric, because we're all sick of it. And then maybe they'll be turfy, because I don't think gender ideology impacts gay men the way it would impact lesbians or women or children. Unless like they're a young gay boy in an environment, I think the bigger risk to gay men is other gay men. So they're not going to feel that sense of danger to trans ideology, because the trans like men, they're not like showing up like coming up to the gay men at the bar, they're like, oh hey, like I'm gonna fuck you, the way like a big man in a dress called Dave would do, you know, to lesbians. They're a lot more aggressive. The chicks are all they're just kind of afraid of their own shadow, they're trying to fuck off and scream at each other. But I think bigger issues, like I was walking down the street yesterday and this bus was going by and it was like HIV isn't scary anymore, and I think that's fucked up. I was like not to stigmatise people who have HIV, of course not, but to say it's like cancer isn't scary anymore, do you know? It's so, why is this only with gay men where you can actually break down push this weird shit, like whether it's dog stuff, because the industries push all this, not like necessarily gay men themselves, but this like shit about HIV, it's because the gay men are doing this, and because they're relating it to homophobia, but it's just so ridiculous, like they wouldn't say about any other disease, and then it does have an effect, because people are taking PrEP, then they're getting chlamydia, they're getting syphilis, because they think they're going to be safe from all of it, and then they're trying to like end the fear around HIV. People are going to get it and their lives are going to be impacted by that. Doesn't mean we need to stigmatise people who have it, but we need to be like, common sense needs to come back in the room, especially within the G, like it really does. Like a lot of gay people, not just fight the word queer, need to fight this like other type of marketing of all this weird shit, because it is kind of odd, you know?
Yeah. It touches on, I think you were asking earlier as well about many things. So, in terms of when you're saying there are some men who come to something like this that would be interested in some sessions but not other issues. So the tension that I'm holding running HumanGayMale, particularly with our WhatsApp groups, is we are not one thing. Gay men are all very different. The one thing, the only thing that you need to agree with us on is the reason we exist bit, which is the sex is real, it's binary, it's immutable, you can't change sex. Gender identity shouldn't be prioritised over sex. Everything else, you can kind of believe whatever you want. Our American WhatsApp group was my first biggest challenge on that, in that we've got right-wing and left-wing people in that. And they're really good now at talking and acknowledging their political differences, but the actual issue they agree on is really good. So, yeah, we are a very broad church in that respect. The thing around there is a distinct physical risk to women from men pretending to be women because of the innate, typical physical strengths of men. I wouldn't negate the risks of trans-identifying females, because once you're hopped up on testosterone, you have a different approach to the world. There's also stuff, I don't have detailed stats on it, but it's a thing around where, although male violence more violent crime is by males. When it's a woman, it's more likely to be a weapon. So I don't want to be in a position where a trans-identifying female is getting rebuffed and she bottles me. So, because that's more likely than her punching me, because she's not going to punch me because I'm 2 foot taller than her. So yeah, I agree with your point about the risk for males is different, but I wouldn't want to have, and having known someone who's been bottled by a trans person, it's a smaller risk, but it's still there, and I think we need to be aware of what that is, because we also have to navigate that, because that then also puts that person, that woman who's bottled someone, if you aren't going to rely on the weapon, you are now still 2 foot shorter than me and potentially at risk.
You need a ladder as well, a ladder and a hammer.
Yeah.
Oh, they all put ladders now.
And on the HIV and sexual health stuff, it ties into the other theme in the report, and part of, again, why setting HumanGayMale up, is there are and Douglas Murray talks about this really well in terms of all the woke issues. We've got more important shit to talk about than the trans stuff. Like, it's in the way. It should be really obvious. There are 2 sexes. You can't change sex. Next. Like, we've got more important stuff to deal with. So it's really frustrating. We've got to deal with that first. Because as you say, there are the kind of issues you've highlighted. Actually, we need to be getting on and dealing with them. So that's part of where I want HumanGayMale to go longer term, is they're picking back up the stuff that people like Stonewall, who should be dealing with it, aren't.
Yeah. And kind of like having that counter current, so it's not just one-way traffic, but you get a conversation going because you start dismantling some of the crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, very, very quickly, you touched upon things like drag race and the mainstreaming of so-called gay culture. That made me think, I've seen a lot of people saying online, I grew up under Section 28, and you check them out, and actually they were 6 years old. And it sort of speaks to, I don't think, a tension in gay culture is people between those who want to see the mainstreaming and those who sort of crave the transgressive element that sort of being gay always was. How much do you think that is a sort of civil war within wider gay culture, and how does that fit in with support or not for transgender ideology?
So, I grew up under Section 28. I'm fine. There were no prosecutions under Section 28. It's another one of those, like, it wasn't a good thing, don't get me wrong, but it's another thing that's been the mythology that surrounds that. I think where it fits in with the bigger picture stuff is that there are, I don't want to say, I'm trying to think, I've not articulated this as a thought, but going back to touching on some of the stuff that others have said, I don't think, well, we definitely don't have a left-right spectrum anymore. We have multiple. We have Leave, Remain, Independent Scotland or not. There are multiple vectors on which we are split now. I think the one that we are is, do I want to be a victim or do I not want to be a victim? And I think the harping on about stuff like Section 28 and other things, it's that there are people who want to be the victim because you get points of being the victim, you get attention for being the victim. So a woman I used to work with quoted in a meeting, and I've got the gif I will use occasionally, from Addams Family, the second Addams Family film, where Wednesday and Amanda are going to do the life-saving thing in the summer camp, and they ask who wants to be the victim. Amanda is like, I'll be the victim, and Wednesday's like, all your life. Some people just want to be the victim, and I think that is at the heart of the woke stuff, is the victimhood mentality, and we need to be not encouraging it and providing ways to not be the victim.
About gay bars in general, many of them are these days quite captured by these ideas. I mean, you're doing events, I guess, monthly recently. You're not really doing them in gay bars. Are you able to do them in any gay bar? Do any gay bars?
So we haven't tried yet. My expectation at the moment would be we wouldn't be able to. When I book it in a bar, I just book it on whatever the website is, and I don't necessarily give it. If they ask, I say it's a gay men's social group or gay men's support group. Most don't ask because it's a chain or a large bar. They'll book out the mezzanine or the private room, whatever it is. They don't need to know, or they don't care to know. If we were to, I don't think we would be able to book out a gay bar. If we go to court and we get a ruling that says what happened to us in Brighton was discrimination, that is then something we can use in trying to book an event at a gay bar and see what they say and then cite the case if they refuse or cancel. But that's kind of deliberately provoking that response. We have also talked about what if we all just kind of get the different branded t-shirts and we just go to a gay bar and see what happens. Eventually that's something we will do. At the moment, we don't book events in gay bars because there aren't really any gay bars, there are LGBTQ plus bars and they're all captured. So until we're at the point we are going there in order to provoke a conversation and change, we're doing stuff in spaces that are not gay bars.
I guess it's about what you said, it is impossible to change what already exists, but create something else.
Yeah, and that's a bit, that's kind of what's frustrating with what happened with the event here, is the Turf Watch Brighton and other people like that online saying about, you're coming here and being divisive, and like, we weren't here to protest Pride, we were doing our own thing separately. Or they've said about, like, why don't you all go off and do your own things? Like, we tried, and you still stuck your oar in and caused trouble.
That was really great, thank you. Thanks.